I have to begin by asking you about what you've been playing this week, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
Something happened. Something went very, very wrong, as near as I can tell. But I'm going to let you explain it to people.
No, nothing went wrong. So when last we spoke about this, I was playing Monster Hunter World.
Yes.
And very happy researching my way across, prehistoric fantasy land, leaving a bloody trail behind me.
Right. A bloody trail of research.
Yep. And then I bought Stardew Valley for Tiny.
Oh, okay. For Tiny.
Yeah, for Tiny on the PlayStation 4. Stardew Valley. Do you know about Stardew Valley?
I have a vague notion that it is some sort of farm simulation kind of thing, but I'm sure you're going to enlighten me further.
No, actually, you pretty much got it. It is a combination of role-playing game and farm simulator. So you are role-playing as a farm. It's actually got a sad little opening because your grandfather dies and he leaves you this envelope. And, the note on the outside of the envelope is, someday there's going to come a day where your life has just ground you down and you feel like you can't go on. Then open the envelope. And then it cuts to you in this like sad gray cubicle farm, just another drone. And, the person next to you is literally popping pills.
Wow.
And then on the other side of you is a skeleton, covered with cobwebs. And you're there and then you open it and it's a deed to his farm. And so, of course, you up and move back to the simple life in this little rural town and you take on his farm.
So Green Acres.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Less comedy.
Oh.
I haven't encountered any talking pigs yet.
Okay.
But and so I mean that's really what it is. There's plenty of stuff back in the day there was a Super Nintendo game called Harvest Moon.
Right.
Which was exactly the same thing.
Back in the day being as much as 4 years ago.
No, Super Nintendo, my friend.
Oh, Super Nintendo. Because that thing, yes. I have a feeling, I feel like that has been on a number of systems.
96 or 97.
Okay.
Yeah. No, 96.
Okay.
Okay, so it's been around a long time. And the franchise, they've continued making more for the franchise, obviously. But it was basically the same thing. I think the only thing, because I really had to think to Harvest Moon. And the only thing it really adds to the Harvest Moon formula is a crafting mechanic so that you can build more stuff for your farm. And you can farm and you can raise animals and there's all these little tasks you do. And, you have to plant seeds and they have a certain number of days before they ripen and then you harvest it and you sell it and then you buy more seeds and gradually build your farm that way. But you can also fish and mine and kill slimes.
I seem to remember watching our mutual friend Sarah the Gremlin play this once on Twitch.
Yeah, probably. It was a very popular game to Twitch when it came out, but I'm a late adopter.
I recall more schmoozing and socializing, though.
There's also a very heavy social mechanic where there are like 20 or 30 people who live in this little town with you. And you basically befriend them all. Which involves talking to them every day and bringing them gifts and learning what they like. And some of them are single so that you can eventually marry one of them. And as you befriend each one, they have their little backstories become more, you learn more of their backstory and you get little optional scenes and stuff with them. And all of them also are really depressing, honestly. It seems like, you know what? It's a lot like Twin Peaks in that respect, where it starts out as this really pleasant pastoral rural town. And then the more you talk to people, the more you discover how sad and screwed up everybody is.
Wow.
Who's struggling with alcoholism, who ran away from their abusive boyfriend who didn't believe in them to come start a new life here as an artist and has no self-confidence. And,
well, to be fair, you kind of get a hint of that because you have to buy their friendship, basically. That seems
it's a very capitalist approach to friendship.
Yeah.
I finally bought my way into marriage.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, well, so this is the thing. I decided to try it out, just out of curiosity, figuring it would not hold my interest. And now, 2 weeks later, there's just so many little things to do, and there's a little routine. And the worst thing about it's one of those games where it's like, I'll just play one more day.
Oh, dear.
Because what you have to, like, there's a clock in it, that runs through the whole day, and then you go to sleep at night, and at night your game saves, and then you wake up and it's the next day. So once you start a day, you have to go through the whole day, and if you don't, you waste time and you're not earning money and stuff. And so it's like, okay, today I'll go fishing, or tomorrow I'll dig down into the deepest parts of the haunted mine. And there's enough variety in the little things that you can do that like if you get bored delving your way to the bottom of the haunted mine, then you can spend a day fishing. And there's special events and stuff too. Like I'm trying to catch rare fish now, because there's obviously a collect them all mechanic to everything.
Sure.
Yeah, it's like you have to get all the fish. And then there's a little community center that is haunted by ghosts that are shaped like apples, and they will rebuild it if you bring them enough items that they request. For reasons. Also, there's an alien in the sewer. I met him.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a strange little game.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Apple shaped.
Anyway, I've completely forgotten about Monster Hunter.
Oh dear.
Because I got trapped in the little routine, and I felt and it's like an enjoyable, very relaxing thing to do. And then you're like, okay, that was fun. That was a fun 20 minutes. Yeah, I'll just play one more day.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm in my second year in game time. So I'm back around to springtime because there's like 4 seasons, like the months are seasons.
Right.
So there's 28 days per season, and that's it. And then you go through a year, and certain things only grow in certain seasons, and certain fish only appear in certain seasons. And like finally, after going through the winter, I feel like I'm in a good position where I can have a good profitable year.
Mm-hmm.
Like you survive your first year as a small business, and now this is the year I'm really going to make it.
Mm-hmm.
So I started raising chickens, ducks, cows, and a dinosaur. I have a dinosaur.
You're raising a dinosaur. Okay.
Well, that was an accident. I dug up a fossilized dinosaur egg, and my chicken coop has an incubator in it so that I can hatch chicken eggs.
Right.
And I was curious. I'm like, and I figured it would be one of those things that obviously it's just the item can't be used on the item. So I tried to pop the dinosaur egg into the incubator, and actually it worked.
Wow.
So yeah, so now I have a dinosaur that lives with my chickens and ducks.
Right. How many chickens and ducks do you assume you're going to have left after the dinosaur matures?
It appears to be an herbivore.
Oh.
Because it seems to be happy eating hay and grass alongside the chickens and the ducks. I am taking a head count every morning of chickens and ducks.
Good. Just in case.
Yeah. If suddenly some of them start mysteriously disappearing or, being stomped into goo, then I will sell the dinosaur. I got to imagine it'll raise a lot of money selling an actual dinosaur.
You think so?
Yeah.
I mean, unless they've seen Jurassic Park, and then you're just out of luck.
Well, someone will still buy it. That's all movies have taught us, that there is always another evil corporation that does not realize what a terrible idea owning a dinosaur is, or creating a zombie virus, or any one of the million other things that these corporations always do.
Right.
Which always makes me wonder, it would be like, I understand corporations are greedy.
Mm-hmm.
And they do greedy things. They do whatever they can get away with to make money. But there are very few corporations that are actually engaged in villain type evil.
Mm-hmm.
Because in order to pull all this stuff off, they have to convince their shareholders it's a good idea.
Right.
You know, and their investors and any creditors who are going to issue bonds to them. Or they have to conceal it from everything, including their auditors. It would actually be a lot harder for a modern corporation to turn into a supervillain organization than you might think. Like, you know, and yet in movies you always see like the corporation underneath their corporate headquarters, they have been building the dimensional gateway that will just, you know, when the planets align, will open the gateway and allow the monsters to come through or whatever it was, or, you know, manufactured the zombie virus.
That stuff's always up in the air.
Can we see the business case for this? Because this seems like a really bad idea. Like, I would just like one investor in these movies to like, okay, but how do we monetize the zombie virus? Yeah. like I understand we built it. Who are we selling it to?
Mm-hmm.
Like, who wants that? Even the military, like, is it really that much easier to take over, say, a city or a country if it's filled with zombies?
You would think that would make it slightly more difficult, in fact. Right?
So we have turned our enemies, which were 90% civilians and 10% army, into 100% mindless killing machines that now transmit a bite virus that turns everybody else into mindless killing machines. All right, let's send in the ground troops to mop up.
Step 2, profit. Step 3, profit.
Was it Umbrella Corporation and all the Resident Evil video games who were using the zombie virus to conceal their crimes?
Yeah.
Like they would do one terrible murder and it's like, well, the only thing to do now is turn the whole town into zombies so no one realizes we killed that guy.
Right. Like, that'll totally get us out of that problem.
Can't you just bury the corpse in the desert like a mobster? It's a classic because it works. You know?
Oh, man.
Yeah. Yeah, so anyway, so that's what I've been doing.
Okay, well, I feel like I still haven't been given the entire update of what you've been up to.
Oh, yeah, there was, I guess I mentioned that too. I've been looking for little videos to watch, particularly when doing my physical therapy exercises. I like to pop a video on my phone.
Mm-hmm.
And I discovered this YouTube channel called Defunctland.
Uh-huh.
And it's something that I never knew I was interested in until I started watching it. It is basically, he goes through theme park rides that are no longer open, theme park rides that have been shut down.
Right.
And talks about the history of their construction and their design, and then why they were shut down and what replaced them and all of that stuff. It's actually really fascinating.
It is kind of interesting.
And I got interested in him because I somehow, some way, YouTube in my recommendations thought that I would be very interested in watching the history and the eventual shutdown of Epcot Center's Journey into the Imagination Pavilion.
Oh.
And man, did that tug a heartstring. Because when I was a kid, my parents took us down to Walt Disney World in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And we went to the Journey into Imagination Pavilion. I was the only one in my family who liked Epcot Center, first of all.
Mm.
They were all bored by it. But I loved Epcot Center.
Sure.
And we went to Journey into the Imagination. And we met, there's a walk-around character there, the Dream Finder.
Mm-hmm.
Because, do you know Epcot Center at all?
I've never been there, but I have watched enough stuff about it.
Yeah, so it's like set up to emulate a World's Fair.
Right.
But it's like the timeless World's Fair of the future. So there's all these different pavilions about transportation and farming technology and stuff. And then across the river, there's a bunch of pavilions for different countries of the world.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the interesting ones was a pavilion called Imagination, which was all about art and creativity and whatever. And the centerpiece of it is this ride where you go through, and it's just a gentle ride where you're just taken through a tour of all these imagination scapes by this character named the Dream Finder? Chaser? Dream Catcher?
He has a little dragon with him, doesn't he?
Yeah, and he has the pet dragon Figment, which he had constructed. See, he flies around on his little device, gathering up all the stray thoughts and ideas that leave people's heads and gathering them into his big, like, Zeppelin-like thing. And then he constructs new imaginations, figments, things. Mm-hmm. Constructs new ideas from them. And so he was a walk-around character, basically a ventriloquist, because he had his dragon with him. And we met him, and for whatever reason, he made a very strong impression on, I guess, 9-year-old me? I must have been 8 or 9.
Must have been something about stealing the dreams of others.
Yeah, that's basically what I do. One of the funniest things, he asked me where I was from, and I said I was from Long Island. And he said, well, Long Island, how long is it? And then, of course, I was stunned. I was 8 years old, and I was being confronted with this question. I don't know how long it is. So I just kind of shrugged and made one of those noises that 8-year-old kids make. Mm-hmm. And then he looked at me, he said, it's about 120 miles. Remember that. Which, and that's like, why did he know that? And I walked away like, why does he know that? I mean, he must really be the Dream Finder.
Must be. There's no possible way he could know that otherwise.
Did I just meet an actual deity? But yeah, I don't know why that little experience stuck with me. So then all of a sudden in my YouTube recommendations, and I guess I have to hand it to YouTube because they did actually recommend something, and I very much enjoyed this, and I will watch the rest of the series. So
great. I'm glad you're having some decent luck with YouTube, because YouTube apparently hates me. Its current decision about the things I would enjoy viewing are what we're going to call body horror, but it's more like, oh, guess what? You want to watch this guy perform surgery on himself, basically. It's like this amateur try to fix this problem he's having, like, his ingrown toenail and all this other. It's like, no, that's not what I want to watch. No, YouTube.
Why is that even a thing on YouTube? I don't know.
I don't understand anything. And I'm not going to link to that stuff either.
Yeah, thank you. But their terms of service, forbid like everything from ripping off Disney movies to whatever they call hate speech. Mm-hmm. They don't have something against self-surgery?
Apparently not. I don't know. But it won't leave those alone, no matter how many times I tell you. Because you can tell YouTube, don't show me these videos, but it just ignores it and shows it to you anyway. Wow. So we're having a disagreement about that. And when it's not doing that... I would love to
know what you initially watched. There was like, oh, okay, that clearly leads to body horror.
Well, see, that's the thing. I can't find out. Because it doesn't say, some videos it'll say, because you watch this...
I actually bet I know what it is. Holy cow.
Yes.
Yeah. For various reasons, have you been researching any medicine or medical practices?
Well, I have. Uh-huh. You think that's
Remember, YouTube and Google are tied together.
That's right. You're probably correct.
So it has decided that you are very interested
in the lowest common denominator of medical stuff.
Well, that's what YouTube is going to have.
Yeah. This man has a zit. He wants you to watch him pop. No, that is not what I want to do. Anyway, when it's not doing that, what it's doing is not recommending anything at all to me. It will just throw up a blank page. Like it's just given up. We don't know what you want. We're not telling you anymore. So then YouTube basically becomes unusable.
With the same frustration as like the long-suffering family member who is tired of trying to buy you Christmas presents.
But except
I have no idea anymore. Here's a gift certificate.
Yeah, exactly. The long-suffering family member will hand me cash or a gift certificate. YouTube will do nothing. just lays there. But yeah. Okay. So Defunct Life. Is this similar in any way to Some Jerk with a Camera?
What?
YouTube. Some Jerk with a Camera. He goes around to Disney parks and theme parks of various sorts and evaluates the rides and especially the movie-based rides.
I have never seen Some Jerk with a Camera, though I am bookmarking it.
Yes, absolutely.
Because it sounds... But no, it is not like... These are more sort of research documentary pieces.
Oh, okay. All right.
In fact, there's very little actual like live video in it. It's connections of interviews along with design documents, maps, old promo videos. Like, I don't know where the heck the guy gets his stuff, but he gets the investor videos that Disney like showed to the people who were, who were supposed to put money into the ride and stuff. There's some real gold in there. It's actually very well done documentary stuff.
Cool. Yeah, Some Jerk with a Camera he actually goes into the theme parks and films inside the theme parks, which you are technically not supposed to do.
Right.
And in fact, a couple of years ago, there was this independent film that got a lot of attention and people were just all over it because it was filmed entirely within the Disney parks and then put together into like a feature-length film. It's a terrible film. It's completely garbage film, but everybody was all ooh and ah over it because it was filmed inside the park. And Some Jerk with a Camera is standing there going, I've been doing this for 6 years now. What's the deal? What's the big deal? But yeah,
he got his start with Channel Awesome or became associated with them?
He at some point became associated with them.
Oh, he left. Oh, I guess he left them along with everybody else last month.
Pretty much.
And now he's got a YouTube channel.
Yeah, okay. Is it Jordan Goldfarb or something like that? I think. I don't know what. Anyway,
Anthony Goldmark.
That's it. Tony Goldmark. Yep. I don't know who Jordan Goldfarb is, but hey, maybe he's cool too. Anyway. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Shall I do a short update on Dad?
Yes, by all means.
You think people want to know?
I'm sure they do.
Dad has landed at physical rehab facility. He will be there likely for a couple of weeks. He's already had one full week there by now. He is getting progressively better. Basically what it is, when they did the surgery on him, they had to, of course, make at some point an incision to drain out all the fluid he had accumulated in his belly. That incision runs right down the center of his belly, basically, and it's through the muscle and everything. So once you cut those muscles, it takes some time for them to get back in shape and regain their strength and help you do all the things they actually, it turns out, help you do. One of which is sitting up and walking and standing and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So he's building up his muscles again as they're healing and is doing better as days go by. He's no longer in any danger whatsoever from the initial problem, from the aneurysm or anything like that. We're now strictly just getting him back in shape so he can move around under his own power and without assistance and do the things he needs to do. Now, that is going to take several months, but he's in the physical rehab, which also contains a bit of occupational rehab, just to get him to a point where he can come home and be relatively safe and not so much in danger of falling over at any given time.
Mm-hmm.
But he's getting better. They're walking him up and down the hallways at the facility, which, by the way, if you have sort of a thing for the 70s aesthetic, this is a wonderful facility because it probably hasn't been updated since then.
What, like all wood paneled and orange shag carpeting?
Pretty much. Although not so much shag carpet because that's hard to walk on. It turns out if you don't have full control of yourself.
Mustard colored appliances.
Yes. Yeah. All that good stuff. Yeah, exactly. If you watch old episodes of Quincy ME or other medical doctory related shows from the 70s, you'll have seen all of this stuff in it.
See, I was instantly thinking of old game shows and like the appliances they used to give away.
Yes.
That were always either that mustard color or that horrible salmon color or seafoam green.
Yes. If you need sound effects for a haunted house, just listen to my dad raising and lowering and adjusting the bed. It's got every creak you would ever want in it, but they are giving him good physical therapy and whatnot.
Which is the important part. That's what he's there for.
Correct.
It's really not the ambiance.
Yesterday he walked 110 feet 3 times, pretty much under his own steam. I mean, he had a walker, but that's just to keep him from falling over. The rest of it was under his own steam. Whereas the day before he had done his best was 45 feet. So there's your improvement.
Excellent. Sounds like he's doing very well.
Yeah. When he comes home, and that we're looking at probably another week, maybe week and a half, something like that. When he comes home, he'll probably have to have a walker for a little while to get around the house safely. But he'll be under control of it. And we'll have to make a couple other small accommodations for him.
Yeah, but eventually he'll have dispensed with even that, right?
Yes.
This shouldn't change his life going forward.
No, it should not. He should be able to he should be able to recover fully to where he was beforehand.
Good.
The only real problem he has right now is it turns out the people at the hospital didn't rotate him in bed enough because of his belly incision. So he has a bed sore in a very uncomfortable place.
Oh, man.
Yes.
I am sorry.
But that's going to get seen to shortly. So anyway, that's the update on Dad.
Sounds like he's doing as well as can be expected.
I think so, yes.
And better. Sounds like he's doing better than can be expected.
Well, and that's the thing. Once again, we're being told, oh my gosh, he's doing really well. We're really surprised he's this far along. Blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay, well... The man is determined to go home. I don't know why that is so difficult for people to understand.
Right? Literally anything in his power to get out of here.
He will follow each and every one of your instructions and then some if it means he gets to go home sooner. Yeah, we're looking forward. One thing I do have to do probably this weekend is rearrange the front room. So it's a little more travel friendly.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think we're going to be in good shape here in a week and a half or so. I finished my live streaming Star Wars campaign with the One Tar and Company. Oh. We wrapped that baby up.
Now, I'm just looking at the calendar here.
Yes.
If I recall correctly, it was to run through April.
Yes, just
April.
April.
It is now May 25.
You're correct. In fact, last night's session was 1 month after the previous session, because a number of things happened in between that prevented the sessions from actually occurring when they were scheduled to. Of course, Dad through no game was going to be played that week, especially not that it was not being on a Thursday, the day it happened. So that was a scrap. And then there were a couple of other things, because we missed a week initially, that pushed us into March, and then we missed a week for Dad. And then the next week we couldn't reschedule because the 2 of the players couldn't make it because they, obviously hadn't planned for it to be still in March and all that. And then we missed another week because of other stuff. And now here we are. We finally finished.
And so how did it go?
I have no idea. It went fine. I have my campaign notebook here where I wrote down my plans for the adventure. There are 12 pages. 4 sessions, 12 pages. I could have saved myself writing about half of these pages because they never happened.
That's the curse of the GM.
Yeah, they never, ever happened. And the thing was, I rewrote each session as we completed the last one, so it was up to date and current and reflected what was going on. And they still, most of it never happened. Like I have in here, they got captured at one point, right? And taken to an encampment. And the idea was that they were supposed to generate a plan for escaping the encampment after making some observations, to see what was going on and how it was happening and all that kind of stuff, right? So I left a big space here so that I could keep track of the plan they came up with. Here's what I have written in that space. Create immediate chaos. That was apparently the plan. Because that's what they did. They were.
Wait, that was their plan or yours?
No, that was theirs. That was. I mean, they didn't even really plan that. It was just like that's what happened. I mean, it was literally they were aware of their surroundings for about 3 minutes before that started happening, and that's fine. I'm okay with that. But it went pretty well. I think we had a good time, even if I was not. It turns out I'm a little rusty as a GM, not having GM'd in quite a while yet.
Yeah, that'll happen.
But we got through it. We did okay. There were a couple of things I had to kind of stop and look up because they were necessary to look up. But most of it, like, critical injury tables and that kind of stuff. But
yeah.
But by and large, we just went with whatever I said and things were fine.
To be honest, I've been running my online campaign for, I guess, 2 months now? But, we've missed so many games due to one thing and another and just the realities of being an adult and trying to fit games in. Mostly me and my issues. But, so I haven't, I was rusty when I started out and I could tell.
Right.
And I am wrong-footed running online. I still feel like I don't have a grasp on how to run a game online.
Yeah.
And because I only get to run like 1 or 2 sessions in a row before we end up taking time off again, skipping a game, I feel like I still just can't run the stupid game. I just feel so wrong-footed every time I go into a session, and I don't know what it is.
Yeah. I was really... I think the last game I actually GM'd was back at Gen Con. And that was out of the beginner box. So that was actually a relatively easy experience to GM.
Yeah.
But it's part of it is just I actually like to get up and walk around my table as I'm GMing, I like some movement, and I like to be able to stand in certain ways or look in certain ways or talk in certain ways that help emphasize the character.
Yeah.
The NPC or whatever for those that need it. And when something major is happening, I like to be loud, about how major this thing is, or when something very personal and private is interesting, I like to lean down next to the PC and kind of whisper right in their ear about what it is that's happening to them at that moment.
Right. You modulate all of this stuff.
Right.
For the emotional,
right.
The emotional tone of the scene.
That's right. But I cannot do that online because the difficulty is you have to be heard. And given Skype and the way Skype works, which is what we were using, it's hard to even know if you're broadcasting.
And beyond that too, with online, if people are having a side conversation or talking and you talk over them, it's not a disaster. Because some people here, they'll be like what or whatever, but for the most part, you can hear 2 people at the same time. But online, because of the way it just handles things, where it shuts, you can only hear one person talking.
Right.
So if 2 people talk over each other, that's it. The flow of that conversation is just ruined. Because I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. Okay. You know, like, oh, okay, sorry, okay, let's say that again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm actually kind of glad the campaign is over now.
Oh.
Well, because now I get to retool, for one thing.
Right.
I get to stop and say, okay, rethink everything about what I was doing and how I did it and all that. And the recordings are up online, so I can re-listen and rewatch and all that kind of thing as well. Right. And just kind of reevaluate how I did, and think about what I can work on to improve things. But also, I'm kind of glad it's over because I need to actually back off from the GMing for a little while, which sounds crazy because I've got all this other stuff going on, with transit and whatnot.
No, I totally understand that myself.
I need to refocus a little bit. And April was fine for that. April was, okay, that's good enough, and I'll have a month to refocus and do this other stuff. Well, it ran over, so now I'm on top of where I wanted to be and not really exactly where I needed to be, but anyway.
See, that's the other thing that I have to think about now is with my Kickstarter and writing the book and publishing the book colliding with my trying to move out of state.
Mm-hmm.
I may have to consider if I can really keep running the game right now.
Yeah.
I hate to do that, but I might need to just take some time off.
Yeah. And the other difficulty is even, scheduling one person to do a thing on a regular basis is pretty tricky, let alone trying to get 5 people to do a thing on a regular basis.
Yeah, right.
That's always a bit of a problem. But yeah, whatever. It was good. We had fun. They enjoyed themselves. They seemed to have had a good time and had fun shooting things and causing chaos and all that kind of stuff. And at the end, they got picked up by the rebellion. So there you go.
Were they intended to be part of the rebellion, or were they the Empire?
They were. Was
it a good ending or a bad ending?
Well, that's interesting. They were fringers, unaligned fringers. They could have gone either way had they wanted to, but they did not want to. And so when the rebellion showed up for story reasons, because little known to them, they were actually playing in a particular time frame with a particular set of circumstances going on outside their field of view.
Okay. Are you saying that you knew where in the Star Wars timeline their events were taking place?
Oh, yes, I did. And they were on a timer and didn't know it, which is fine because that's the way I operate sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Just because it makes things more interesting, I find. But anyway, the rebellion showed up, kind of sort of more or less bailed them out a little bit. They did all the heavy lifting, but the rebellion was there kind of to mop up, I guess, more than anything else. And then they had a conversation which involved, well, do you you're a doctor, we need doctors, you're a mechanic, we need mechanics, kind of thing. Would you like to join us? So that's how that went.
Well, let me ask you though, because you sort of didn't mention this when you said they all had a good time.
Mm-hmm.
Just despite your finding you're a bit rusty, did you enjoy doing it?
I did for the most part, yeah.
Okay.
There were a couple of occasions where I was like, oh, I wish you hadn't done that, that kind of stuff. Simply because it meant more work for me in the in between session time that I didn't always necessarily have. Because one of the things when I agreed to do this was I looked at what the minimum viable commitment was, and then added a little bit to that to make sure I had enough time to do all the things I wanted to do with it, but didn't overload things and push other things around too much. But every once in a while they made a choice. It was like, oh, that's going to be more work than I really intended to put into it. But okay, I guess that's what we'll do,
I think that we need a law for that. You have Sturgeon's law and Murphy's law. Mm-hmm. We need a law for the, given equally good choices, the players will always choose the one that creates the most work for you.
Right. That's GM's law.
Yeah. That's like the first law of GMing.
Yeah.
There's probably about 30.
Yeah, at least I would think. GM's first law. There you go. There it is. But yeah, we got through it and did good. And I am willing to run another campaign for them. But it looks like it's going to be September before that can happen.
Okay.
And B, not sure I want to do another Star Wars one. I might want to do something else, and we'll see how they feel about that. I mean, if they want to do Star Wars, I'll do Star Wars, but I might like to try something else as well.
Are we talking something with the same engine, like, say, Genesis?
Could be. Strange how that works. And by the way, pursuant to one of your sort of generalized complaints about the Star Wars and the Genesis system.
Oh, good grief!
No, I just want to point this out. Okay, it's very easy, very simple. The dice pool stuff, all that was second nature by the second session. They had it all nailed. So I don't know. Other than that, that's it. That's all I got there. Oh wait, there's more Star Wars stuff I can talk about. You ready for this?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, so you remember that we talked last week, I think it was, about Silverwing Armory?
Yes, and her delightful notebooks.
Her delightful notebooks. Well, while we were having that conversation, sir, you pointed out that her pilot flight log had become available.
Yes, I remember that.
And at that very moment, I ordered 3 of them. Okay,
so you're blaming me as an enabler.
Yes,
sounds like.
Exactly.
Okay,
yep,
fair enough.
That's it.
So, I expect some kickback from Silverwing Armory at this point. we literally have a statement that I just got you 3 sales on air.
She sent me some extra little card things, like little note cards I could mail out to people as a gesture of thanks. But
wow.
I have to tell you, as good as those look in the picture on the website for Silverwing Armory, they're even better in person.
Yeah, I saw the picture you sent me.
Yeah, these are pretty awesome. So,
did she send you that miniature, or did you?
No, that's one of mine.
Okay,
that is an old.
And she threw in an X-wing miniature. That's nice.
No, that is I believe that's an old Micro Machines X-wing.
Okay. Oh, yeah, it looks like it.
Oops, I just dropped the part that was going to tell me. The little stand it sits on. But
and what is the little puffin-like bird there?
It's from the new film. It's called A Thing with the stuff. I haven't seen it. I know.
Never mind.
Porg. It's a porg. P-O-R-G.
I stopped caring.
I don't know how to pronounce this. I'm going with Ingjald.
That's what I was going to say. That's what it looks like.
Ingjald. And I'm sorry, Ingjald, if that is not how to pronounce your name. And even more sorry if I pronounced it so wrongly that you don't even recognize who it is.
Or worse, if it is like a swear or a terrible idiom in your native tongue.
Yeah. And I didn't include the last name for similar reasons.
Because there was no way to pronounce that without accidentally pronouncing some sort of terrible idiom.
That's right. But you remember our discussion on base building and your method of building sections that give some sort of bonus so that it actually matters to the game in some way?
Right.
Ingjald wants to point out birthright. Because from what he remembers, its rules on base building were very fun, especially the fact that most classes would want to increase the civilization characteristics of their provinces, while the wizard would want to do the opposite, as a civilized province has less magic available. I looked at the birthright, a brief explanation of the birthright campaign setting, and it is heavily geared toward politics and political maneuvering and that kind of stuff. With you're basically, I guess, a ruler. Is that how that works? You rule a certain section of land or whatever.
Yeah, well, there were 2 different modes of play in it, and this going back years. I haven't played it recently, obviously. It was a campaign setting for AD&D 2nd edition, back when there was no shortage of campaign settings for AD&D 2nd edition. And there were 2 modes of play. There was the normal adventurer mode where you would play as your hero, but eventually your hero would be granted a land, a plot of land to rule over as regents. So you rule the regency. And there was a whole other set of rules that governing your province, and even doing things like going to war and building it up and doing all sorts of stuff. It was pretty neat. And it built on some of the old ideas of like, what was it? The BECMI basic D&D game. Built a lot of domain level play late in the game, and and obviously in the original Chainmail and the original White Box D&D, there was a bunch of what campaign level play, which was you were rulers and raising armies and stuff like that, and building strongholds and settlements. So
okay,
yeah, I might have to go back and look at that for research purposes. It's been a long time.
Research the heck out of it.
Yeah. Which I am not going to stab it with an insect glaive. I actually do mean just reading it.
Okay.
It was like a Kingmaker campaign.
That's fine. Jan wrote into the website on episode 34. That was, by the way, this is the most current response we've ever had to anything. Given that we've now caught up entirely in our backlog. These are our most recent responses. So episode 34, Jan said, on a side note, I'd like to thank Scott. I'm now successfully running the angry tomato technique, which is to work 25 minutes, then skip the break and work 25 minutes again.
I would like to point out as a side note, I got into a lot of trouble with my physical therapist over the angry tomato technique.
Oh, really?
Yeah, well, because part of the point of it was every second tomato, I am supposed to get up and do a whole bunch of exercises so that I'm not sitting for more than an hour. Yeah, so like forgetting to reset the timer and skipping breaks and then realize I worked for an hour and a half. Yeah, that's not the best technique.
Got yelled at, huh?
Oh, I got yelled at.
Shame on
Get yelled at a lot. She has a student now, too.
Oh, does she?
Apparently, he don't think I'm funny either.
Maybe you're just not approaching it the right way. All right. Minister Agent Car 16.
Minister Agent.
Yeah, I know. I can't help it.
Okay.
They've named themselves.
Fair. I thought by the time we had run through that everybody had finally given up on all that garbage. After we made such a big deal out of it, which was actually my secret hope. Was that we would be done with it.
Mr. Agent Car 16 wrote in regarding his previous writing in about XP adjustments for PC performance levels. You remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. He says, all right.
How do you decide if the PCs have performed well or not so well and give them experience? Okay.
Right.
Okay.
He says, all right, I'll accept that I phrased that question badly. Yeah. He goes on to say, I think my issue is that I'm generally a systematic GM. Once I've set a rule or a precedent, I'll stick to it for the rest of the campaign, adventure, or whatever. Hence, if I'm going to be making judgment calls regarding how well an encounter was handled, I want some kind of deterministic system for making those judgment calls. After listening to your discussion of the subject, I'm inclined to think that changing XP may be a technique that doesn't work particularly well with my GMing style.
Do you know, I very nearly replied to this comment.
Oh, did you?
And then stopped myself, like, I'm about to be mean.
Aww.
And this isn't my website, and this isn't, one of the Angry GM's projects. I don't think I can respond appropriately. And then, of course, you put it in the show.
Of course. Of course. You're gonna so you want to know why I put it in the show?
Yeah, please.
Because I wanted to illustrate a particular point, which is this: we don't give advice for your campaign, as we have said many times before. What you do in your campaign and how you choose to run your campaign is entirely up to you. As such, sure, maybe the shifting XP technique isn't for your GMing style. That's fine. Don't worry about it. Do what you're going to do. It's your table. Run it your way. Now, that doesn't mean Scott's not going to get all upset about it, but, doesn't matter. He's not at your table.
Can I get all upset about this for a moment here?
Sure.
There's a word that really bothers me in this.
Uh-oh.
It's the word deterministic.
Uh-oh.
Okay. One of the great strengths of role-playing games is that we're not beholden to systems. It's not a video game where we have to go through a step of rules, like if this, then this, if this, then this, and if it's not programmed in, we can't do anything. The GM, as a subjective and creative mind, is the greatest strength of role-playing games. And what you're basically doing by saying, I want a deterministic system for everything I do, is taking away that. What you're really saying is, I wish I could just run a video game for my players. No, bad, go in the corner and think about what you've done.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
I'm sorry.
Now you've done it.
Sorry. But we don't give advice for your game. And if you find that this doesn't really work for your particular GMing style, then that's fine. You don't need my permission to run your own game any wrong way you want. I'm just going to go over here and sob.
Fine.
No, okay, obviously, Agent Car 16. I say that partially in jest.
Mm-hmm.
I do really think trying to be too deterministic or too systematic is a weakness. And it's something that I would encourage anybody to move away from. Accept the fact that you are subjective and develop your subjective judgment well enough so that when you make a subjective judgment call, you can be confident that you feel like you would have made the right call. And in the same situation, you'll keep making that same call again and again and again. But don't try to force yourself to be the computer that you're not, because you're digging at what makes role-playing games different from anything else we do.
Fair enough.
Is that politer? Did that sound
better.
okay?
That's better. I'm happier with that.
Okay.
You get to stay in the show this week.
Damn. I was really hoping I wouldn't have to. Please send me to the corner.
Nope. No corners for you. Here we go. Mike Merles on the Twitters the other day. Let's see what other day this was. This other day was the 20th of May, which would have been a Sunday. First, Merles was asked a question. And it goes like this. Hey, Mike, big fan of you and huge fan of 5e. Do you think, in your personal opinion, that Gary would like how far D&D has come? Or would he think it's too complex compared to the original idea? Now, he's been given only two choices with which to respond. Mm-hmm. Okay? Would you like to guess which of those two responses Mike Merles resonated with?
That's a tough question. I feel like I'm on Jeopardy because I don't know how to answer this, because I know if Merles is honest and knows Gary and knows the game, I know how he should answer. But he still works for WotC.
Are you sure he works for WotC still?
I'm not sure. I get the sense that he's gradually going more and more off the reservation, as it were.
Yeah.
I gotta go with towing the company line. Final answer. He towed the company line.
All right, you're wrong.
Damn.
Merles said,
I'm sorry, Merles. I should have had more faith in you.
Merles said, I think he'd feel it has added too much complication and mechanical customization for characters. My sense is he saw the act of play as what made PCs unique. As in, a character is unique for what they did, not what they can do.
Yeah, that's about right.
Your thoughts on that are in complete alignment with Mr. Merles?
More or less. I mean, there's some argument to be made that, well, like remember, Gary was working on a second edition of D&D before the second edition of D&D. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Before TSR released the second edition of D&D. And he was adding more character side mechanics. Specifically, he was interested in adding more classes and more specialized stuff. And that was something that they were asking a lot about. Like that's where we got like the Thief Acrobat and he was talking about adding part. I can't remember what it was. So, I mean, in some of the Dragon magazines, he was talking about adding more classes and stuff. But I don't know that he would have gone that far. And, like, I only have, like, because he did work after he left TSR.
Right.
He did, was it Dangerous Journeys?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, Dangerous Journeys.
I mean, he almost
did. And
I
really haven't looked into that, so I don't know what that was like to see some of his design philosophy, but I know he did speak out very strongly against both AD&D second edition and third edition D&D for the reasons of mechanical complexity that he felt were removing the play experience. That there had been too much of a focus on, just creating these unique characters as just a pile of statistical choices. So I think Merles' read on that is actually right. What surprised me most is that Merles actually said it.
Yeah. I mean, you got to kind of wonder where Merles is in his head at this point, I mean, he's done a lot of things over the last, half a year, whatever, where it's like, are you really all that interested in D&D anymore, Mike? I mean, I'm sure he is, but it's not coming across that way a lot of the time. But whatever, that's fine. That's good. What I get out of this is an interesting question, I think.
Yeah.
What is the minimum you need for a PC? Do you need classes and specializations and skills and all this other stuff? What is, in D&D in particular, what is the minimum you need?
Well, see, again, every time you ask one of these questions, I immediately want to go to my caveat of talking about the concept of a need or a should is the wrong way to approach the question. It's, does this serve a game purpose and how does it make the game better? Obviously, everything you add to a character adds to the complexity of playing that character. If characters have skills, then you have added the complexity of building a skill system and having a list of skills. And even if it's a very simple skill system where you just say, anytime you take an action that pertains to this skill, you get a bonus of +2 to your check or whatever, which is sort of the simplest way you could do a skill system. So you want to know that you're getting something in the game out of that. Players obviously enjoy it. Like you can watch, there are a number of players who sit on Twitter all day. I could name them, but I won't. Just generating new unique characters. And for someone who is, say, an expression seeker, the act of character creation and the number of levers to pull in character creation is very important to them. But do you need all that stuff? I guess technically not. I mean, let's take the most minimal character possible. Okay? Your character sheet is literally your character's name. Nothing else mechanical. Okay, and every action you attempt is a coin toss. It's, you declare an action, it's either impossible or works automatically, or if there's any ambiguity in what the outcome would be, you flip a coin. One coin, heads or tails.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and that's it. That's what happens if you remove all the character from it. So, I mean, would that be a role-playing game? Would it be totally playable? Absolutely. Totally would be. Would the average player find that satisfying? I don't know. So, because, I mean, it's, when you get down to it, like, it's a rough question.
Mm-hmm. They get rougher as I go along.
Well, obviously, in order for a play... See, the problem with that is not just that it wouldn't be interesting to play the character, because the character is basically nothing. But the other side of it is that your choices of what actions to take aren't meaningful. Because the outcomes are essentially going to be random and you have no way to hedge the outcome. Okay? For example, I mean, take a really simple situation. You come to a locked door. Okay? If you are skilled in picking locks, that's an option to you. If you're not, breaking down the door is your option. Right? But breaking down a door is always an option, whether you are skilled in picking locks or not. So let's say you have the choice. You can either pick the lock or break down the door. So the first order decision would be, well, which am I better at? Right? Am I more likely to succeed if I pick the lock or if I break down the door? But then the second order, okay, what if something is chasing you? Right? Well, now you want to get through there as fast as possible, but let's say you're not nearly as good at breaking down the door as you are at picking the lock. Suddenly that's a meaningful choice. It's like, which risk do I want to take? Do I want to take the risk of failure and getting caught or the risk of taking too much time? I'm more likely to succeed at one, but the other one is a much faster thing. And then, or you take the alternative, like there's something on the other side of the door that might hear you. Right? And now it's, okay, if I kick open the door, I'll have the element of surprise, but I better jump in and attack right away because I'm going to lose the element of surprise quickly. If I pick the lock, then I can push the door open quietly and see what's on the other side, maybe not get spotted, and then I can formulate a better strategy, but I'm not really that good at picking locks. So the different mechanical things on your character sheet, not only do they tell you what you can choose and what they can't choose, as the situations change, they add additional criteria to the choices you make. Do you follow that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But now again, like, is that do you need that stuff? Technically not. Technically, you don't need anything. Okay. Does it add to the game? Yes, it does. Now, having 1,000 skills in the game, does that add to the game? Well, certainly it does. But does it add enough to the game to outweigh the complexity of having a list of 1,000 skills? Probably not.
So, all right, given all that, and presuming, for example, you have your absolute bare minimum character, right? Just a name and, the coin flip results, whatever.
Sure.
All right. So what then is meant by the act of play is what makes PCs unique? If every character was like that, how do they become unique through play?
Well, part of it is that it comes down to, if you have no mechanical levers to pull when it comes to making a choice between, say, killing a monster or sneaking past it, you're still going to make a choice in the game, right? Mm-hmm. But now that choice is entirely driven by your vision of the character. Unconstrained by the character's abilities, you can do whatever the character and what you, by extension, feel is the right choice. Okay, so now through play, you are defined. So over time, let's say now I'm watching you play this character that is just a coin flipper, and you always take the sneaky choice. Okay, because all the choices are the same. So you can sneak, or you can fight, or you can run, or you can negotiate, or whatever, and you always take the sneaky choice. Well, now that has said something about the character you're playing. Your character is a sneak. Your character is non-confrontational. And and that's an interesting thing to say, because then the question is, well, which is it? Are you a sneak, or are you non-confrontational, or are you a coward? And how did your character get like that? Right? So that's what I mean. That's what I think he would be in the minimalist game, how play defines the character. But of course, we're now looking at two extremes. Mm-hmm. We're looking at the game with no mechanics at all. And what Merles is talking about here with Gygax is, where is the tipping point? Mm-hmm. Right? Which is, you figure on the one hand, there is the minimalist character, which is just a name and coin flips through the whole game. And on the other hand is a character sheet that is 50 pages long and defines absolutely every single possible action your character could take and precisely how likely they are to succeed at all of them, all else being equal. So that every choice you make is purely a mechanical calculation of which is most likely to succeed in that situation and lead to the best consequences, whether it succeeds or fails. Right? Okay. So everybody's going to put the tipping point between those two situations, and which is preferable, somewhere in the middle, I assume. I don't think anybody wants to play either of those games. So the question is, has D&D passed a threshold where Gary would say, we are too far toward the 50-page character sheet with absolutely everything defined, that it leaves too little room for character definition through play for me to be happy with? You know, the problem is this is all very subjective.
Oh, of course it is.
Right. So it's like, well, exactly what point would Gary put it versus where is D&D on that spectrum versus where is old D&D on that spectrum, and so on. But if to see this same argument playing out, talk to the people in the OSR.
Yeah.
I've had a number of OSR people approach me since we had that discussion.
Oh, good.
And talk to me about what's going on over there. And interestingly enough, a lot of the things that they said to me mirrored this conversation right here. Where there is a level of mechanical complexity that has been dropped onto characters that they feel is actually getting in the way of defining your character through play.
Okay. And do you think that's the kind of complexity the original question was referring to, was the complexity of character?
I don't know. I mean, but that's sort of the problem, isn't it? I mean, you have 140 characters to ask this question. And it was basically, what would Gary think of D&D today? Would he like it or would he not? So
I don't think that's the important question.
What do you think was the important question?
Would he play it or not? Because you can not like a system and still play it. I mean, it does make it substantially more difficult to really get any enjoyment out of it. Mm-hmm. But, you've always got that one friend who wants to play a different system that you don't particularly like, but because, they want to have a shot at it and try it out and all that, you swallow it and go ahead and sit at the table and try to have a good time anyway.
Okay. But see, I don't think that's the important question.
You don't?
Here's my important question.
Okay.
Who cares? Who cares what Gary would think?
Well, now hold on here. The man did invent the entire hobby.
Uh-huh. So?
Well, obviously you have to know what he thinks to know whether or not you're allowed to enjoy it.
Well, so you take my point. Gary invented the hobby 50 years ago and died 10 years ago. And he was not in, like, I mean, he was writing his own stuff, but the hobby evolved way beyond him and grew far beyond his reach. And I'm not even saying like D&D got away from him and people made D&D better. That's not my point. My point is that the hobby became more expansive and lots of different types of games also appeared. Because the original D&D had a very narrow appeal.
Okay.
Right? It grew out of a very niche hobby. Now, I'm not saying RPGs aren't still a niche hobby.
Right.
They are.
Yeah.
But they're far less niche than they were. I mean, look at what a big revolution it was when Castle Ravenloft came out, and suddenly you had adventures that were structured to tell stories. You know, that was a big change. And then, of course, along came like the storyteller system and Vampire the Masquerade and all of that stuff that presented a more character-driven, story-focused experience than what you got out of core D&D. You know, that all has to be taken into account as part of the hobby too. And you get a feedback loop where as other games were doing these other things and experimenting in different ways, the designers of D&D were watching this stuff and noticing the good bits that would actually feed into a better D&D experience. That is when they weren't running on ahead and evolving D&D. You know, I will still say one of the most substantial developments in role-playing games was D&D 3rd edition and the idea of why don't we start designing from the idea of a core mechanic, one system that resolves everything, and then hang everything else off of that. It would allow us to clean up a lot of the rules, and that's exactly what they did. You know, and that was the birth of D20.
Yeah. And
that was also, at the time, a very unique idea for role-playing games.
I think it's also fair to point out that RPGs as a hobby in and of themselves were already getting away from Gary even before he passed.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would, conservatively estimating things, I would say by the time first edition came out, it was already spreading and growing in first edition AD&D came out. It was already spreading and growing in ways that he hadn't anticipated and maturing, away from him rapidly at that point.
Well, about this? Yeah. What if I put an actual date on this?
You put an actual date on that. Go right ahead.
1975. That's when role-playing games started to get away from Gary. Because that was the release of Tunnels and Trolls. Which was, what if we took this neat game and made it accessible to people? Because Dungeons & Dragons is overcomplicated.
Right.
That was what Ken St. Andre set out to do with Flying Buffalo in 1975 and wrote Tunnels and Trolls. He also added the solitaire experience to it. And that was pretty much the first big attempt to take what D&D had done and run it in a more evolved direction. Successfully or not, you can decide, but that was at least the design purpose.
We read the book, but they were talking about some of his, I hate to refer back to it, I know, but they were talking about some of the things he did after he was ousted from TSR. And we had Legendary Adventures.
That's what it was, Legendary Adventures.
Almost had Legendary Adventures.
Legendary Adventures was the one he couldn't get published, and then Dangerous Journeys was the one he did.
Right, I think that's correct. Okay. I think that's correct.
Both misspelled, so you can't find them in.
Yeah.
Right, they both involve J's.
Yes, there's J's in there that shouldn't be, and I don't know what else. But anyway, the point being, I've never seen any of his subsequent designs.
Yeah, So it makes it hard to decide what he would have thought of the future.
Right. It's hard to see where he was going to take it, if nothing else. So in my head, there are very few creators who can make a thing, right? Whatever that thing might be. And then make a second version of said thing that isn't very much almost the first thing with a couple of things, scraped off or buffed off it or whatever.
Okay.
And that kind of continues by and large as they go through new editions and whatnot. So in my head, I think that if Gary had been in charge of D&D the entire time, 5th edition, assuming we'd gotten this far, would not be all that different from 1st edition. Okay?
You really think so?
I think so. Because what happened was he found a successful formula, right? In the first editions, the first versions of D&D, right?
Right.
And knowing that works, there's less incentive to change that than there is if it hadn't worked at all. Okay. You see what I'm saying?
See, what you're describing is basically the Lucas problem. Where eventually you have a system that works, you become more set in your ways and nobody to tell you no.
Right. So
you just keep doing what you're doing, only more. But I don't think that's an inevitability of creators. I think creators can evolve.
Yeah, they can, but I don't think a lot of them actually do.
Okay.
Because it's hard to get away from something works.
Right.
It's a bigger risk to do something you're not sure about than it is to do the thing that works already.
Right. So, but then the question also becomes, if D&D had, if Gary had stayed in charge there and had kept, running the show, as time went on and more resources and more people were added to the design staff because the game got bigger, so it would require a larger team, how much would Gary keep control over it?
Given some of the stories we are now familiar with, I think he would, until he retired, he would still attempt to control the entire thing. He would have a design team, but I think primarily the design team would be there to carry out his design.
Well, now that leads to another interesting question. Then maybe was Gary's ousting inevitable?
Well, see, that is interesting. And it's either oust him or he retires. And that's the only way. That's the only way you get him out of the company.
At some point, a rebellion would have had to happen.
Yeah.
Okay. At some point, it would have had to be taken from him.
What you would have had more than likely, if he hadn't been ousted, what you would have had is at some point in, I don't know, I'm going to say the mid to early 90s, maybe the late 80s, but I think more likely the mid to early 90s. He would have had sort of a mass exodus from the company.
Right.
And those people would have gone off and formed a new company.
Paizo.
To do the same thing.
So he would have accelerated the formation of Pathfinder.
Probably, yeah. Yeah. I think that's likely.
No, I agree with that assessment.
In order for D&D to be considered a modern system, the changes that happened over the years are inevitable, I feel. If they hadn't happened, then it wouldn't be considered a modern system. It would be a classic system, in the model of the old days. It's been persistent. And I'm not sure it would be nearly the thing it is now if they had done that.
Well, now that's interesting, because if it hadn't become the thing it is now, since we're playing the counterfactual game anyway.
Sure.
And developing a whole alternate history. If it didn't evolve enough that it developed a broader appeal, then I think it wouldn't be considered a classic system. I think that's as far as modern systems would have gotten.
You think so?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, let's be honest here. Every role-playing game company that exists owes its success to Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay.
Because they don't market to anybody else but the fans of to gamers, basically.
Right.
So they're just waiting for people who play Dungeons and Dragons and would like a different experience and drift away to it. Mm-hmm. Drift away to whatever they're offering instead. So if the pool of people coming off D&D were that much smaller, then I don't know if there would be as big a rush to create other games. And I'm not saying there wasn't a really huge rush anyway. You know, there were a few notable games that were created, but yeah, you know, I sort of wonder if games that were very far beyond the D&D line, like the storyteller system and, you know, all the vampire dark world stuff, would have even caught on.
It's possible.
You know?
Yeah. Somebody would have had to have done a Gygax. And just, you know, basically repeated the sort of deliberately accidental development of something new.
Which is interesting because then they would have had to market it from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
And who knows what that might have opened up. Honestly, role-playing games, because if that happened, role-playing games might be a lot bigger now than they are.
Could be.
You know,
somebody would have figured out how to appeal to a much broader market,
how to reach people,
uh-huh.
How to get these games in front of people who have never heard of them or played them without needing an established gamer to teach them the game.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's all very interesting stuff.
It is.
I feel like
we got a lot of speculation out of that question.
Yeah. I feel like this is something we ought to throw open to our listeners. Not that we have it closed usually, but if you have an opinion or an idea of how this might have all gone, jump in our comments and let us know what you think.
Yeah, go ahead. Let us know the alternate history Watchmen universe version of what would have happened with D&D if Nixon was still president.
Right.
You know, and Dr. Manhattan went off to be emo on Mars.
Right.
Where would D&D be?
Exactly. That's what I want to know.
Dr. Manhattan, right? Dr. Manhattan was the blue guy?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Anyway, let us know what you think on that one. That's your official question for the episode. You can email it to us at digressionsandragons.com if you're more comfortable with that. You can email it to us at digressionsandragons@gmail.com. Or you can hop on the website at digressionsandragons.com and get in the comments there. Or, you know, whatever. Okay. There are ways.
Now we're all confused. Now we have no way to know.
There are ways. Figure it out. You're smart. In the meantime, though, I am afraid, sir, that we are once again out of time.